Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Speedy's Garage. Today we're obviously not at the shop. We're actually on our way to Mr. Mopar shop. But first we got to stop by and get a part for our new engine. So we're going to head down to our friends at Freeland Dodge and pick up our part. We're going to get some tools together and then we're going to head over to Keith's shop. And today I'm actually going to show you the engine we decided to go with as the replacement for Go Man Go. Now I've said before I had a decision to make. I could have done a built engine from a performance shop, had one machined. I suspect the heads, or at least a head, or there's some form of head damage on Go Man Go's engine right now, so I had to figure that out. Did I want to have a built short block made, then tear Go Man Go's engine down, only to find out the heads were also damaged, then have to go back and buy heads for it, and then do we want to upgrade something inside of it, bigger cam, different displacement. If I have the engine built, we could have gone with a 426, or we could just have a built motor in the same stock 6.2 liter displacement. And you start talking about cams and heads and port and polish and valve springs and all that stuff, what valves and retainers, and you could go down a rabbit hole, to be honest. I did all of this, you know, all this built motor stuff with Orange Crush, and honestly with a Hellcat I really didn't want to have to go down that same path again. On Orange Crush, it had just a regular 5.7 in it when we got it. We had Arrington Engines build us a forged stroker motor. It went from a 5.7 to a 6 liter. We did PSI springs in the heads for an upgraded RPM shift point. We did Molly pistons, a scat crank, K1 rods, a custom grind cam, and all that kind of thing. I really didn't want to get back into something like that again, and so I kind of, you know, did the costing on it, and by the time I added up the heads, and then the biggest thing was the core charge. So if the block was still good, then I would get my core charge back. If the block wasn't good, it just made the price go up that much more, and there's no guarantee this block in Go Man Go is good anymore. It put a hole in the oil pan, and there's no telling what else could be damaged inside that might not be able to be machined out. Now there's a chance it is still good, but you're gambling at that point. And so by the time I added all that up, I'm like, you know, that's just really more than I want to get into. I don't want to build a race car out of it. I still want to keep it a nice, fast street car. And so I started to kind of fall back on just doing a Hellcat motor. You can order a Hellcat long block without the supercharger, and you get everything from valve cover to oil pan. It includes the front timing cover, the crank pulley, 100% complete. I think it even comes with spark plugs and oil in it. I mean, it's all the sensors and everything. My buddy Andy at East Coast Moparts actually had one on the shelf. I looked online and they were actually on back order. The Hellcat engines were on back order, so I got a little concerned, like, oh crap, I'm not gonna be able to find anything. But Andy said, hey, I always keep one on the shelf. I've got one here. If you decide you want to go that route, let me know and I can ship it to you. And he said the good news is that Mopar has what's called a no-fault core charge. It means you can actually take the broken pieces of the block and stick them in the box and ship it back to them, and you still get your core charge. So that was another plus for me. So I started thinking about going down that path. But before we get to that, we're going to head over to Freeland and pick up our part. Well, we're here to see our friends at the Freeland Dodge parts department. We've got a part on order we're here to pick up. So let's go in, see what they're up to. Here's Jerry, hardest working man in the parts department right there. He got us hooked up with our part. See that? You probably know what that means. Here's his fearless leader, Jack.
Vroom, vroom.
Second hardest man working in the parts department right there.
That's right.
All right, we got our parts. Gonna head on back to the house. Gonna go to Keith's place and swap this thing out. Well, we're back over at Keith's shop. Got Go Man Go up here on the lift, and I'm gonna show you what we decided to do on a motor. So here it is. Crew Chief Greg actually came up with the idea for this when we were having dinner leaving the track after the Hellcat engine failed. He said, man, why don't you try to get you either a Demon or a Redeye long block? And so I called around a few people to see who might be able to get one, and Andy from East Coast Moparts came through. He said it'd be a pretty tall order and he'd have to pull some strings. I think there were just a handful of them available in the country. And he texted me on a Saturday. It was like the Saturday after the issue occurred. He said, hey man, I think I may have found something. Call me Monday. And I called him. He said, I got my finger on the order button. Do you want it? And so talked to me about the price and everything, and I'm swore to secrecy. I'm not supposed to talk about that at all. But he definitely hooked me up, and we got a Redeye long block. When I say long block, I was really surprised how complete this thing is. It is valve covers to oil pan, front timing cover, water pump, crank bolt. It's even got spark plugs in it. And I think it's even got oil. Even got oil in there. The bushing for the automatic transmission is there. All of your sensors and connections, 100% ready to drop in the car. And it came with this instruction sheet, and it says you've received a service long block built with 2019 black cylinder head covers. If the subject vehicle is a 2019 or later Redeye, this engine is a drop-in replacement. However, if the subject vehicle is a 2018 Demon, then the cylinder head covers on this service replacement engine need to be replaced with the covers from the subject vehicle. And that's because the Demon engine, the valve covers were red. That's the only difference in that motor. And yes, I am going to go ahead and repin the crank. We've already popped the factory crank bolt out, picked up the replacement as you saw earlier, got our jig ready to go, and this is going to be so much easier with the engine out of the car. Now some people say you don't need to pin the crank, and maybe you don't. If Dodge is right and 148 foot-pounds plus 150 degrees of torque on that bolt is enough, fine and good. But if they're wrong, that pin will be in there to prevent me from ever having issues with that crank. All right, we got the jig set up just like before, only obviously now we got a lot more room. I'm putting a little tool oil on the bit, keep it cool and cutting. We've got our tape marked up to, I think it's 1 5/8 inches, so we're good to go there. I believe we got her. And I did write the torque spec on the back of my hand so I didn't forget it. It's 148 foot-pounds plus 150 degrees. Take the jig off, clean the hole out, then we'll put our pin in. So there's the hole drilled. We got everything cleaned up just like we did before. Now we're gonna get the pin in. I'm gonna use some green sleeve sealant from Loctite or Permatex just to make sure the pin never goes anywhere. Hardened tooled steel is what you got. It just slides right into place, and we're going to put the crank bolt back in. Alright, we'll get the crank bolt tightened. Remember, this is the new one. Brand new crank bolt, don't reuse it. And it's 148 foot-pounds. And now we got to mark it and tighten it to another 150 degrees past 148 foot-pounds. Now this is probably overkill because Mopar is a super nice snap-on torque wrench that actually reads degrees. But I'm always a little bit paranoid I'll lose track of where the bolt is. So what I've done is I put a dot on the bolt washer as well as the pulley at 0, 90, 180, and then split the difference at 135. And we know somewhere between here and here we're going to be at 150 degrees. And we are using the special service tool to hold the crank pulley still, otherwise we'd have to figure out some kind of way to lock the engine or whatever. So you may want to try to get one of these if you're going to try to do this with the engine out of the car. I used it with the engine in the car as well, so I didn't have to lock the flywheel. So best way to do it is using one of those. That was 80.
So that went right back.
100, 30, 40, 50. Bang, just like that. So there we go, we got it tightened appropriately. Mr. Mopar torque wrench will actually tell us the foot-pounds when he lets off. So it went around to about right at 150, maybe 151 degrees, and it read 201 foot-pounds. So that's what it actually read. Now keeping in mind, this is a stretch bolt now. The old bolts you usually just tighten and leave them. I talked about this before. These new ones actually stretch so the bolt keeps tension on everything, and it's an upgraded design. But we're done. Now we just get the engine swapped out. So I thought I'd take a minute and describe to you guys some of the differences between a standard Hellcat engine and a Redeye or Demon engine. The big difference obviously is the horsepower output. The Redeye is capable of 797 horsepower, but we know this same engine in a Demon on race gas is capable of 840 horsepower. So they've made some upgrades to allow that. The first thing I found is the Hellcat cam versus the Demon cam. The specs I could find on the Hellcat cam suggested they were about the same as the 6.4 liter 392, being 215 intake, 221 exhaust at 0.050. They did make some comments about there being some small changes, but I could never find what they were. If you know what those cam differences are on that Hellcat cam, leave me a comment below and let me know. But on the Demon, I was able to confirm it is a 224 intake and 240 exhaust at 0.050. So you get quite a bit more cam there, and I believe that's to take advantage of the increased rev range that engine is designed to run at. So the factory standard Hellcat engine is set to shift at a maximum of about 6,200 RPM, and the Demon engine is set about 64 to 6,500 RPM. So we've seen a lot of the custom tuning on the Hellcats raise those shift points through PCM and TCM tuning, and you pick up about 60 horsepower just raising the shift points on a Hellcat to about 6,500. So the Demon and Redeye engines already have that as standard. The other big difference I found was the oil flow. You get 33% more flow to the valve springs and the upper part of the valve train, and they also doubled the flow on the piston cooling jets. There's little jets on the back sides of the pistons that spray oil on them to cool them down. On the Demon engine, they doubled the oil flow there. Other differences are the forged alloy steel crank has revised balancing. It has induction hardened crank bearing surfaces and individual journal optimized main bearing clearances. The forged high strength alloy pistons have a 30 micron increase in piston to bore clearance. The powder forged connecting rods are upgraded with shank and big end revised ultra high tensile fasteners. The has a revised valve train design, which I already described, and that allows that extra RPM range. And it has single groove collets on valve stems for improved stability. And so that's a big, quite a few differences that will increase your durability and your longevity of the engine, especially if you're intending to race it, which they assumed most Demon and I guess Redeye owners would do. And finally, you have an oil pan and windage tray that's optimized for high accelerations, and they tested it up to 1.8 G. And what they did is they put some baffles inside to keep that oil around the oil pickup tube during hard launches. So those upgrades, as well as it being a factory engine, and I was able to get one 100% complete, as you saw, from valve covers to oil pan, front cover, water pump, everything included, even spark plugs and oil, made it a no-brainer for this upgrade. And that's how you turn lemons into lemonade. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Check us out on Instagram. It's at Speedies_garage, as well as our website, www.speediesgarage.net. Be sure to subscribe. You see where we end up with this new bullet.